Death to the ancient Greeks was not a dramatic rupture. It was not an explosion of pain or light. It was not a punishment. It was a transition. They did not imagine death as a moment that shattered existence. They imagined it as a quiet shift, almost subtle, a loosening, a release, something that happened gently, often without resistance, and almost always without ceremony. For the Greeks, life did not stop. It changed rooms. When a person died, the world did not collapse around them. The sun still rose. The wind still moved through trees. The city continued its routines. Death was not chaos. It was order asserting itself. This is why the Greek underworld was not built on fear. It was built on inevitability. To understand the underworld, you must first understand this calm acceptance. The Greeks did not ask if someone would die. They asked when and what followed afterward. Their mythology does not scream at death. It speaks to it quietly, as something ancient and unavoidable. At the moment of death, the Greeks believed the body did not panic. The breath slowed, the warmth faded, the eyes lost their focus, and then, without spectacle, the soul separated. This separation was not violent. It was not ripped away. It drifted. The Greeks imagined the soul as something lighter than the body, something that could slip free when the body no longer held it firmly. This was not a tragedy in itself. It was a process. They believed that death was overseen, not chaotic, that someone was always present, not to judge, not to punish, but to ensure the transition happened correctly. Death, like sleep, had its own order. That is why death was often compared to rest, not because it was peaceful, but because it was structured. The Greeks imagined that the soul did not immediately understand what had happened. There was a moment of confusion, a softness, a pause between states. The body lay still, but the soul lingered close, adjusting to the absence of weight, hunger, pain, and breath. This moment mattered because it was here that the journey truly began. The underworld did not start underground. It did not start at gates or rivers. It started at the body. The Greeks believed the soul hovered near its former life, briefly, aware but detached. Sounds became distant. Emotions dulled. The urgency of the living world faded quickly. This fading was not cruel. It was necessary. To carry too much of life into death was dangerous. Longing could delay the journey. Attachment could distort the path. The soul needed to let go before it could move forward. This is why burial rituals mattered so deeply. Funeral rites were not for the living alone. They were instructions for the dead. They told the soul that it was allowed to leave, that it had been seen, that it had been acknowledged. An unburied body was not just dishonored, it trapped the soul in uncertainty. The Greeks feared this state more than death itself. A soul without ritual was restless, unable to move forward, unable to return, suspended between worlds. This was not punishment, it was neglect. Death, properly done, was merciful. The Greeks did not believe the soul was judged immediately. There was no sudden reckoning, no cosmic trial at the moment of death. Judgment came later. First came separation, then movement, and movement was inevitable. This is what made death strangely comforting in Greek thought. You did not fall into nothingness. You went somewhere. somewhere ancient, somewhere prepared. The underworld existed long before you were born. It would exist long after you were forgotten. That permanence mattered. To the Greeks, the underworld was not built to scare the living. It was built to receive the dead. It was stable, unchanging, and indifferent to individual stories. Indifference was not cruelty. It was fairness. Everyone arrived, kings and slaves, heroes and cowards, loved and unloved. The underworld did not discriminate at the entrance. Status dissolved quickly. Titles lost meaning. What mattered was not who you had been, but that you had finished being alive. This idea was unsettling, but also calming. No one escaped. No one was singled out. The Greeks feared chaos more than death, and the underworld was the opposite of chaos. It was structured, mapped, governed, predictable. Death did not throw you into darkness blindly. It placed you on a path. That path began quietly, with the final separation of body and soul. The Greeks believed the soul did not scream. It did not fight. It accepted movement because resistance was pointless. Fate had already decided the timing. This acceptance is why Greek death myths feel restrained. There is little panic, little protest. Even grief is contained, ritualized, shaped by custom. The living mourned loudly so the dead could leave calmly. That balance mattered. From this perspective, death was not an enemy to defeat. It was a boundary to cross, a door that opened only one way. The fear was not of what waited beyond, but of failing to cross properly. This is why the Greeks feared improper death more than death itself. Drowning without burial, dying far from home, being left unnamed. These were horrors because they interrupted the journey. They delayed entry into order. Order was sacred. The underworld was the ultimate expression of that order. It did not promise happiness. It did not threaten torment by default. It promised continuity. Existence without urgency. Time without pleasure. For a culture that understood life as fragile and short, this mattered deeply. The Greeks did not imagine eternal reward for good behavior. They imagined eternal placement, a correct location for every soul. Not joy, not suffering, position. This is why death was not dramatic. Drama belonged to life. Death belonged to structure. As the soul detached and prepared to move, it did not yet face judgment. It faced direction. The path ahead was fixed. There were no choices to make, only movement forward. This lack of choice was frightening, but also relieving. No decisions, no responsibilities, no struggle. The living world demanded constant action. The underworld demanded only arrival. This is why Greek stories of death are quiet at first. The terror comes later, at the borders, at the rivers, at the gates. Not here. Here, at the moment of death, there is only stillness, a pause, a final silence before the journey begins. And in that silence, the Greeks did not imagine fear. They imagined inevitability. Leaving the body was not imagined as an escape. It was imagined as a release. The ancient Greeks believed the body did not lose the soul. The body let go. At the moment when breath finally stopped, the connection loosened gradually, not violently. The soul did not tear free, it drifted. The way mist lifts from the ground at dawn. There was no urgency, no confusion that required panic. only separation. The Greeks imagined the body as a temporary shelter, strong while it functioned, heavy when it failed. When death arrived, the shelter no longer held, and so the soul moved on, not because it wanted to, but because it could no longer remain. This movement was irreversible. Once the soul detached, it could not return fully. It might linger near the body briefly, but it no longer belonged there. The warmth was gone. The senses were dull. The body had become foreign. This was why touching the dead was unsettling. The Greeks believed the soul remained nearby just long enough to recognize that its former home was no longer usable. That recognition was quiet. There was no struggle, only acceptance. Acceptance did not mean peace. It meant inevitability. They believed the soul retained awareness, but not urgency. The sharp emotions of life faded quickly. Hunger, ambition, anger, fear, these belonged to the body. As the soul drifted free, those sensations softened. This softening was dangerous, because if the soul detached too gently, it might not realize it needed to move on. The Greeks feared souls that lingered. A soul that remained too long near its body could become confused, lost, unanchored. This was why burial rituals were not optional. They were signals, clear instructions. You are dead. You may go. Without these signals, the soul might wander aimlessly, clinging to familiar spaces, unable to begin its journey. Such souls were not evil, but they were unsettling. They were unfinished. The Greeks believed that certain deaths made separation more difficult. Sudden deaths, violent deaths, deaths far from home. These disrupted the natural loosening process. In these cases, the soul might resist movement, not out of choice, but out of shock. This resistance was feared. A soul that did not leave cleanly could disturb the living, not through haunting, but through imbalance. Crops failed, illness spread, dreams became restless. The boundary between worlds thinned, all because separation had gone wrong. The Greeks believed that at this moment, after death, before the journey, the soul was most vulnerable. It no longer had the protection of the body, but had not yet entered the structure of the underworld. It existed in between, and what exists in between is unprotected. This is why they believed a guide was necessary. The soul did not find the underworld on its own. It was not a matter of wandering until something appeared. Direction mattered. The Greeks believed that a guide arrived quietly, without announcement, not to judge, not to comfort, simply to lead. This guide was Hermes in one of his oldest and most somber roles. Hermes was not only a messenger of the gods, he was a guide of souls. He escorted the newly dead from the world of breath to the edge of the underworld. This was not a conversation. The Greeks did not imagine Hermes explaining death or offering reassurance. He did not debate, he did not persuade. He appeared, and the soul followed. Following was instinctive. At this stage, the soul still carried faint impressions of life. Memory lingered, but emotion dulled. The urgency to act was gone. The desire to resist was weak. This made obedience easy. The Greeks feared this obedience because it meant that once separation occurred, choice diminished rapidly. The soul did not argue its fate. It accepted movement because it no longer possessed the energy to refuse. This loss of resistance was deeply unsettling to the living. It suggested that identity was fragile, that willpower depended on the body more than anyone liked to admit. Once the body failed, so did the strength to protest. Leaving the body meant leaving agency behind. The Greeks believed the soul became lighter as it moved away from life. Time felt different. Distance lost meaning. The living world receded quickly, as if wrapped in fog. This was why the dead did not return. Not because they were imprisoned, but because nothing pulled them back strongly enough. The Greeks imagined that once the soul had begun this movement, the world of the living felt distant, muted, and unimportant. Even love weakened, even grief softened. This was frightening to those still alive. It meant that bonds felt eternal only from one side. The dead did not long to return. They moved forward because nothing compelled them to stay. This belief reshaped how the Greeks understood death. It was not a theft. It was a release from attachment. Painful for the living, but strangely neutral for the dead. Neutrality was the theme. Leaving the body did not feel like triumph or despair. It felt like crossing a threshold without ceremony, a shift so quiet that it could almost be missed if not for the stillness left behind. The Greeks believed that the soul, once guided away, did not look back. Not because it was forbidden, but because looking back required desire, and desire belonged to the body. This is why death was final, not because of force, but because nothing pulled the soul backward. By the time the journey truly began, the living world was already fading. The soul moved forward, not in fear, but in absence of resistance. This is what terrified the Greeks most. Not death itself, but how easily everything was released. The road to the underworld was not a road you chose. It was a road that revealed itself once everything else had fallen away. After the soul left the body and followed its guide beyond the edges of the living world, there came a stretch of movement the Greeks rarely described in detail, not because it was unimportant, but because it was meant to feel indistinct. The road was not meant to be remembered clearly. It was a passage, not a destination. The Greeks believed this road existed outside ordinary geography. It was not measured in distance, it was measured in separation. Each step carried the soul further from breath, warmth, and urgency. The farther the soul traveled, the quieter everything became. There were no landmarks meant to comfort, no signs pointing backward. The living world did not leave footprints here. The road did not echo with memory, it absorbed it. This was intentional. The Greeks believed that clinging to life delayed the journey, so the road was designed to loosen attachment. Familiar sounds faded. Familiar faces disappeared. The soul moved forward because nothing invited it to turn around. The road did not rush. Time behaved differently here. Moments stretched, but without tension. There was no waiting, only motion. The soul did not feel boredom. It did not feel fear in the way the living did. Fear required urgency. Here, urgency had already drained away. This calm was unsettling. The Greeks feared this road because it revealed how easily identity could thin. Titles, achievements, grievances, all dissolved quietly as the soul progressed. What remained was awareness without weight. This was not punishment. It was preparation. The Greeks imagined that souls traveled this road together, but not in companionship. They did not speak. They did not recognize one another. Each soul moved in isolation, not because it was alone, but because connection required desire. And desire belonged to life. The road did not isolate by force. It isolated by absence. Some souls moved smoothly. Others hesitated. The Greeks believed hesitation came from unfinished business, unburied bodies, unresolved rituals, unacknowledged deaths. These souls felt resistance, not because the road rejected them, but because they had not been properly released. This was why the living feared improper funerals. A soul delayed on the road was not lost, but it was restless. Restlessness was dangerous. The Greeks believed restless souls did not wander aimlessly. They lingered near thresholds, borders, crossings, places where worlds brushed against one another. These places became heavy with unease. Dreams grew troubled near such places. The road itself, however, did not punish hesitation. It waited, waiting with its cruelty. The Greeks believed that once the soul fully committed to movement, the road became effortless. The guide faded. The sense of being led disappeared. The soul moved because movement was all that remained. This transition was subtle. There was no announcement that the road had begun, no clear moment when the living world ended. The Greeks feared this ambiguity. It meant that death did not have a single edge. You did not fall into the underworld. You drifted toward it. The road narrowed as it progressed, not physically, but perceptually. Distractions vanished. Thought simplified. The soul stopped asking questions because questions required alternatives. There were no alternatives here. This inevitability was the most frightening aspect. The Greeks understood fear as something that arose from uncertainty. The road removed uncertainty. It replaced it with direction so absolute that resistance no longer made sense. This was not mercy, it was design. The road existed to ensure arrival. Souls who had lived loudly did not move faster. Souls who had lived quietly did not move slower. Life made no difference here. All souls were equal in movement. This equality was deeply unsettling to the living. It suggested that everything they valued dissolved quickly once motion began. The Greeks believed the road to the underworld could not be mapped by the living. Those who returned, rare broken exceptions, never described it clearly. Their accounts were fragmentary. Shadows, sensations without sequence. This reinforced the belief that the road erased memory. Memory tied the soul to life. The road weakened memory deliberately. The Greeks did not imagine this as cruelty. They imagined it as necessity. To enter the underworld carrying the full weight of life would make eternity unbearable. The road prepared the soul for stillness. As the soul traveled, sound diminished until it was no longer perceived as sound. Silence here was not emptiness. It was uniformity. No variation, no interruption. This silence frightened the Greeks more than screams. Screams ended, silence did not. The road passed through regions that were not places in the human sense. The Greeks spoke of mist, twilight, and dimness, not as scenery, but as states of being. Light existed, but without source. Darkness existed, but without threat. Everything was muted. The soul did not feel watched. It did not feel judged. That would come later. For now there was only transit. This lack of judgment was unsettling. It meant that morality did not matter yet. Good and evil were postponed. The soul was neither rewarded nor punished on the road. It was simply moved. The Greeks feared this postponement. It suggested that justice was not immediate, that one could pass far beyond life before facing consequence. But the road did not care about fear. It cared about continuity. The Greeks believed the road ended not with a gate, but with a presence, a change in density, a sense that the movement had reached a boundary that could not be crossed without permission. This was where hesitation returned briefly. Not fear, recognition. The soul sensed that beyond this point, return was no longer possible in any form. No memory, no message, no dream. This awareness was faint, but it mattered. Those who crossed this boundary did not look back, not because they were forbidden, but because the idea of backward no longer existed. The road did not threaten, it did not persuade. It simply carried the soul until carrying was no longer required. And then, quietly, it ended. Not in relief, not in terror, in arrival. For the soul reached any gate, any judge, or any destination. It encountered water. Not one river, but many. The ancient Greeks believed the underworld was shaped and defined by rivers, each carrying a different weight, a different function, a different kind of forgetting. These rivers were not obstacles placed for drama. They were mechanisms, systems that processed the soul, preparing it for what came next. Water, to the Greeks, was never neutral. It erased, it separated, it transformed. The first river most souls encountered was Acheron, the river of sorrow. Its waters did not rush. They moved slowly, thick with quiet grief. This was where the soul first felt the full distance from life. Acheron did not punish. It acknowledged. The Greeks believed that sorrow had weight, and Acheron carried that weight away. Souls who crossed it felt the final release of personal grief. Regret softened, longing dulled. The ache of separation faded into something manageable. This was not mercy, it was necessity. A soul that carried too much sorrow could not proceed. Beyond Acheron flowed the most famous of all the rivers, Styx. The Styx was not merely a river. It was a boundary so absolute that even the gods respected it. To swear an oath by the Styx was to risk annihilation. The Greeks believed the Styx represented unbreakable division. Once crossed, there was no return to what had been left behind. Its waters were dark, heavy and unnaturally still, as if movement itself hesitated within them. The Styx did not cleanse, it sealed. Crossing the Styx meant the soul accepted final separation. Life was no longer accessible, even as memory. The living world became irrelevant, not forbidden, irrelevant. This terrified the Greeks, because relevance was what gave life meaning. The Styx erased relevance without violence. Souls who lingered at its edge were those still tethered to life, unburied, unacknowledged, or unwilling. These souls were believed to wander its banks endlessly, unable to cross, unable to return. This was one of the greatest fears in Greek thought. Not punishment, delay. To wait forever without progress. Beyond the Styx flowed Cocytus, a river of cries and mourning. Unlike Acheron, Cocytus did not soften sorrow. It preserved it. The Greeks believed this river held the echoes of voices that could not let go. Broken promises, unfinished grief, rage that had nowhere to go. Souls touched by Cocytus did not scream, but they remembered what it felt like to want to scream. This memory was part of judgment, not yet condemnation, but exposure. Cocytus ensured that nothing unresolved passed unnoticed. Then there was Phlegethon, the river that burned. Not with flame as humans understood it, but with intensity. Phlegethon represented consuming force, passion, violence, excess. The Greeks did not imagine it as eternal torture. They imagined it as purification through intensity. Souls associated with rage, bloodshed, or uncontrolled desire were believed to pass near Phlegethon, not to be punished, but to be stripped of momentum. Fire did what water could not. It slowed what burned too fiercely. And finally, there was Lethe, the most feared. Lethe did not harm, it erased. The Greeks believed that souls who drank from Lethe forgot their lives completely. Names vanished, faces disappeared, love dissolved, pain faded. Everything that had defined the soul as an individual blurred into nothing. This was not considered cruelty. It was considered peace, but it was also terrifying. Because memory was identity. To forget everything was to survive without self. Some myths suggested that not all souls drank from Lethe fully. Heroes, the exceptional, the punished, but most souls did. The Greeks believed this forgetting was what made eternity bearable. Endless time with full memory would become unbearable. Lethe made duration survivable. These rivers did not exist in isolation. They braided through the underworld, shaping regions, boundaries, and paths. Souls did not always encounter them in the same order. The journey adapted to what the soul required. This adaptability frightened the Greeks. It meant the underworld was not mechanical. The rivers knew what the soul carried. They removed what could not continue. The Greeks did not imagine these waters as violent. They were calm, slow, inevitable. Resistance was pointless. Water always won, not through force, but through persistence. Souls did not brown. They were altered. This transformation was the true function of the rivers. They reduced the soul to something compatible with eternity, stripped of urgency, stripped of excess, stripped of identity if necessary. Only then could judgment occur. Only then could placement happen. The Greeks feared these rivers because they represented loss without trauma. No screams, no struggle, just quiet subtraction. What they removed could never be reclaimed. To cross the rivers of the dead was to agree without words to change forever. An agreement was assumed. The rivers did not ask permission. They flowed. After the rivers came the crossing. Not a test of courage, not a trial of worth, a transaction. The ancient Greeks believed that no soul crossed the final waters alone. A ferryman waited at the edge, patient and unmoved by pleading or fear. His presence was constant. His task never changed. His name was Charon. Charon was not a god in the way others were gods. He did not rule. He did not judge. He did not intervene. He performed a function, and that function never paused. The Greeks imagined him as old beyond measure, not aged by time, but shaped by repetition. He had ferried the dead since the first death, and he would continue until the last. This constancy made him frightening. Charon did not hurry. He did not speak more than necessary. He did not explain the journey. Souls did not ask him questions, because questions assumed alternatives. There were none. The crossing existed because it had to. Between the world of the living and the regions of the dead lay water that could not be crossed by will alone. The ferryman was the only passage, and passage had a price. The Greeks placed a small coin, an obol, on the body of the dead, usually beneath the tongue or on the eyes. This was not symbolic, it was practical. Without payment, the crossing could not happen. This belief carried deep fear. A soul without a coin was not punished with pain, it was punished with delay. It wandered the riverbank, unable to cross, unable to return, neither alive nor placed among the dead. This state was worse than death, endless waiting without progression. The Greeks feared poverty in death more than poverty in life. To be buried without payment meant abandonment, not by gods, but by the living. Charon did not take pity. He did not bend rules. Souls begged in silence. Some raged, some pleaded. Charon did not respond. He did not enjoy cruelty. He simply did not deviate. The Greeks understood this as fairness. If Charon made exceptions, the system would collapse. The underworld depended on boundaries. The ferryman was one of them. His boat was small, narrow, bare. It was not designed for comfort. Souls boarded without ceremony. There were no seats, no arrangement. Everyone stood or crouched as space allowed. The crossing was quiet. The water did not splash. The oar moved slowly. The journey did not take long, but it felt complete. Each moment reinforced finality. This was the last movement the soul made by effort. Once aboard, there was nothing to do but remain. The Greeks believed the ferryman's presence enforced acceptance. To step into the boat was to acknowledge that return was impossible. Charon did not argue this point. His silence said enough. Some myths tell of living beings attempting to cross. Heroes, musicians, warriors. Each time, the crossing required deception, force, or divine permission. The living did not belong on the boat. And Charon resented them, not because they were alive, but because they disrupted order. The Greeks imagined Charon as hostile to disruption. He tolerated no novelty. The dead behaved predictably. The living brought chaos. This reinforced the idea that death was not dramatic. Drama belonged to life. Charon's role stripped the process of emotion. No tears mattered. No status altered the fee. Kings paid the same coin as slaves. Equality returned at the oar. This equality comforted and terrified the Greeks. It meant that no achievement exempted you from procedure. Everyone crossed the same water in the same way. The ferry did not stop for memory. It did not honor reputation. It carried weight, not story. The Greeks believed that once the boat reached the far shore, the soul stepped off without resistance. There was no hesitation. The crossing had already done its work. Acceptance had been completed mid-river. This is why the crossing mattered more than arrival. Charon's river was not meant to be crossed quickly. It was meant to be crossed consciously. Every stroke of the oar reinforced separation. The living world faded behind the soul, not abruptly, but steadily. This gradual fading was intentional. A sudden break would provoke fear. Gradual detachment dulled it. The Greeks feared Charon, not because he was cruel, but because he was unmoved. He represented a universe that did not react to individual suffering. The ferryman did not punish those without coins. He simply did not take them. This distinction mattered deeply. It meant that injustice could occur without malice, that suffering could result from neglect rather than intent. The living carried responsibility for the dead. Improper burial was not just disrespectful, it was catastrophic. Families ensured payment because failure meant condemning a loved one to endless waiting. This fear shaped ritual, economy, and memory. Coins became sacred, not for their value, but for their function. Charon transformed money into passage. This transformation terrified the Greeks. It meant that something as small as a coin could decide eternity. The crossing ended without announcement. The boat touched shore. The souls disembarked. Charon turned back immediately. He did not watch them leave. His task was already beginning again. Another soul waited. Another coin would be offered. Another crossing would occur. Charon did not remember faces. He remembered function, and that was enough. For the Greeks, the ferryman embodied the most unsettling truth of death, that it proceeds without regard for narrative, that it continues regardless of grief, that it is efficient, repetitive, and eternal. The boat never stopped moving for long. The river never emptied, and the ferryman never rested. After the crossing, there were gates. Not gates meant to impress, not gates meant to threaten, gates meant to hold. The ancient Greeks did not imagine the underworld as a place that tried to keep souls out. It welcomed them without resistance. The gates existed for a different reason entirely. They were not there to stop the dead from entering. They were there to stop them from leaving. At these gates stood a presence that required no explanation, no announcement, no movement beyond slow breathing and patient attention. A guardian whose task never changed and never ended. His name was Cerberus. To modern eyes, Cerberus often appears monstrous, teeth bared, head snarling, chains straining. But this image misunderstands his purpose. The Greeks did not fear Cerberus because he attacked the dead. They feared him because he made escape impossible. Cerberus was not a hunter. He was a boundary. The Greeks believed that once a soul passed the gates, it no longer possessed the strength to resist placement. But strength alone was not enough to ensure order. There needed to be something that made return unthinkable. Cerberus provided that certainty. He did not chase souls into the underworld. He faced outward, toward the living world. His attention was fixed on what might attempt to come back. The dead did not interest him. This detail mattered deeply. It meant that death was not enforced through violence against the dead, but through absolute prevention of reversal. Cerberus was described as massive, ancient, and tireless. His multiple heads did not represent rage. They represented awareness. Nothing approached unnoticed. Nothing passed unseen. Some myths describe 3 heads. Others describe more. The exact number was less important than the idea. There was no blind side. The gates themselves were not ornate. They did not symbolize punishment or reward. They symbolized finality. Once crossed, the underworld did not need to threaten the soul. The system would take over from there. Cerberus ensured the system remained closed. The Greeks believed that souls rarely even acknowledged Cerberus. By the time they reached the gates, resistance had already drained away. Fear no longer spiked. Curiosity no longer pulled. The soul passed without question. Cerberus watched, unmoving. But the living feared him intensely, because the living still wanted to return. Greek myths tell of a few rare figures who crossed these gates while alive. Heroes, musicians, warriors favored or cursed by gods. Each time, Cerberus reacted not with chaos, but with focus. When Heracles descended into the underworld, Cerberus did not attack blindly. He tested, he resisted. And when subdued, it was not through trickery, but through overwhelming force and divine permission. This detail is important. The Greeks believed Cerberus could not be bypassed by cleverness alone. Intelligence did not open the gates. Music did not open them. Courage did not open them. Only permission did. In another myth, Orpheus lulled Cerberus into stillness with music. But even this was temporary. The moment permission expired, the order of the underworld reasserted itself. Cerberus did not fail. He paused. The Greeks feared this distinction. It meant that exceptions did not weaken the system. They confirmed its authority. Even miracles did not change the rules. They merely delayed them. Cerberus represented permanence. He did not symbolize cruelty. He symbolized certainty. The gates behind him were thresholds beyond which identity no longer argued for itself. No name, title, or memory granted leverage. Past achievements carried no weight at this point. The soul had already been processed by water, movement, and crossing. Now it entered containment. Containment did not mean imprisonment. It meant placement. Every soul belonged somewhere, and Cerberus ensured that once placed, it stayed placed. This concept comforted the Greeks in an unsettling way. They did not fear an underworld that actively tormented. They feared disorder. The idea that the dead could roam freely was far more disturbing than eternal stillness. Cerberus prevented contamination. Without him, grief would never end. The dead would linger. The living would be haunted not by memory, but by presence. The boundary between life and death would collapse. Cerberus held that boundary intact. This made him sacred. He was not worshipped with affection. He was respected with dread. The Greeks did not pray to Cerberus. They acknowledged him. They spoke his name carefully. He was not an enemy. He was necessary. The gates marked the last moment where movement resembled choice. Beyond them, the underworld unfolded into regions, judgments, and placements that no longer required enforcement. Cerberus was the final guard against chaos. Once the soul passed him, escape ceased to be an idea. The Greeks believed that even gods did not casually cross these gates. The underworld was sovereign. Once inside, even divine beings respected its boundaries. This sovereignty made the underworld stable. And stability mattered more than kindness. Cerberus did not grow tired. He did not age. He did not question his role. Eternity did not wear him down, because his existence was not experienced as time. He existed as function. That function was vigilance. This is why the Greeks feared Cerberus more than monsters who killed. Death ended life. Cerberus ended return. He represented the moment when hope, real hope, disappeared quietly without drama, not torn away, simply rendered irrelevant. The gates closed without sound. Cerberus remained, and beyond him, the underworld opened fully, not as a threat, but as a structure that would now decide where the soul belonged. The journey forward would continue, but the journey back was over. Beyond the gates, the underworld did not open into chaos. It opened into structure. The ancient Greeks imagined the realm of the dead as vast, layered, and carefully arranged. Not a single place, but a system of regions, each shaped by purpose rather than emotion. The underworld was not built to frighten. It was built to hold. Souls did not wander freely. They were guided, sorted, and placed. This geography mattered because it reflected how the Greeks understood existence itself. Life was uneven, fate was uneven, but death brought a kind of order that life never fully achieved. The underworld was quiet, but not empty. It was still, but not barren. It stretched outward in muted expanses, neither bright nor pitch black. Light existed without source. Shadow existed without threat. Everything felt subdued, as if intensity itself had been filtered out. This filtering was intentional. The Greeks believed that strong emotion could not survive eternity. The geography of the underworld existed to dilute feeling, to slow thought, to stabilize what remained of the soul. At the heart of this geography lay the region where most souls arrived, the asphodel meadows. This was not a punishment. It was not a reward. It was the default. The asphodel meadows stretched endlessly, covered in pale fields and faint growth that never fully bloomed and never fully died. The air was calm. The ground was soft. Sound carried poorly. Souls here did not suffer. They also did not rejoice. The Greeks believed this was where the majority of humanity belonged. Ordinary people, those who lived without great crime or great glory. Farmers, craftsmen, children, parents, the unnoticed and the unremarkable. In the asphodel meadows, identity softened. Souls retained vague awareness, but memory faded. Conversations were rare. Movement was minimal. Time passed without urgency. This was not torment. It was neutrality made eternal. The Greeks found this both comforting and unsettling. Comforting because it promised rest, unsettling because it promised insignificance. Most lives ended not in drama, but in quiet continuity. Far below this region lay Tartarus. Tartarus was not simply a place of punishment. It was a foundation, a depth beneath the underworld itself. The Greeks described it as infinitely distant, unreachable by accident, and sealed by layers of separation. This was where boundaries were enforced. Tartarus held those who disrupted cosmic order. Titans, betrayers of divine law, mortals whose crimes were so extreme, they threatened balance itself. The punishments here were not random. They were specific. Endless labor without progress. Desire without fulfillment. Motion without escape. The Greeks believed Tartarus existed not to satisfy cruelty, but to contain danger. Souls placed here were not merely being punished, they were being neutralized. Its containment reassured the living. It meant that some acts truly mattered, that the universe did not absorb all wrongdoing into quiet neutrality. Some forces required permanent restraint. Tartarus was dark, but not chaotic. It was structured severity. Above, beyond the meadows, existed a region spoken of with hesitation, the Elysian Fields. Elysium was not heaven, it was exception. The Greeks believed only a few souls reached this place. Heroes, those favored by gods, those who lived extraordinary lives or were granted passage by divine choice. Elysium was calm, bright without glare, warm without heat. Fields here did not fade. Music carried. Joy existed, but quietly, without urgency. What made Elysium unsettling was not its beauty, but its rarity. Most souls would never arrive here. The Greeks did not imagine a moral ladder leading upward. Virtue alone did not guarantee Elysium. Fate and divine favor mattered more than ethics. This disturbed the idea of fairness, but the Greeks accepted it. Life was never fair. Why should death be? These regions were not separated by walls. They flowed into one another gradually, guided by judgment rather than distance. A soul did not walk from one place to another freely. Placement occurred naturally, as if the geography itself responded to what the soul carried. This responsiveness frightened the Greeks. It meant the underworld was not passive. It recognized. The land itself knew where you belonged. Souls did not choose their region. They found themselves there. Movement slowed. Awareness adjusted. Resistance disappeared. This lack of choice defined the geography. The underworld was not a place to explore. It was a place to settle into. The Greeks believed the terrain dampened longing. Even souls in Elysium did not yearn for more. Satisfaction replaced desire. Completion replaced ambition. In Tartarus, desire remained, but only to demonstrate its futility. In the meadows, desire dissolved entirely. This balance maintained order. The Greeks feared disorder more than suffering. A chaotic afterlife would mirror the worst aspects of life. A structured one offered predictability. Predictability was mercy. The geography also prevented overcrowding of meaning. Not every soul could matter eternally. Not every story could echo forever. The underworld absorbed excess significance until only stillness remained. This was the Greek solution to mortality. Not immortality of self, but immortality of system. The land endured. The rules endured. Souls passed through and settled. The underworld did not evolve. It did not improve. It did not decay. It remained. This permanence was terrifying and comforting at once. It meant that nothing you did could alter the architecture of death. But it also meant death itself was reliable. You would arrive somewhere. You would belong somewhere. And once placed, the geography would hold you gently, firmly, without question. The Greeks did not fear flames or demons. They feared placement, because placement meant acceptance, and acceptance meant the end of becoming. After placement came judgment, not judgment as accusation, not judgment as punishment, judgment as classification. The ancient Greeks did not imagine the dead standing before a furious tribunal. There were no raised voices, no pleas, no bargaining. Judgment in the underworld was quiet, efficient, and final. It was not meant to feel personal. That was its power. The Greeks believed that once a soul passed the gates and entered the structured regions of the underworld, it was brought, without urgency, without resistance, before three figures whose task was neither mercy nor cruelty. Their task was accuracy. These were the judges of the dead: Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. They did not represent morality as humans understood it. They represented order. Each judge had a role. Minos was the final authority when cases were unclear. When placement required decision beyond routine, Minos resolved it. His judgment ended debate, not because it was harsh, but because it was accepted as inevitable. Rhadamanthus judged souls from the east, those whose lives were shaped by laws, customs, and restraint. He was associated with discipline and clarity. His decisions were precise and unyielding. Aeacus judged souls from the west, those tied to lineage, inheritance, and legacy. He was associated with boundaries and access. He did not punish, he assigned. The Greeks feared this system because it removed emotion entirely. There was no courtroom drama, no persuasion, no last-minute revelation that could change fate. The judges did not ask questions because questions implied uncertainty. Uncertainty did not exist here. The Greeks believed that the soul did not speak during judgment, not because it was silenced, but because speech was unnecessary. Everything relevant was already present. Life was not summarized through confession. It was visible. The soul carried the imprint of its actions, not as memories, but as weight. Some souls moved easily. Others dragged something behind them. The judges did not need testimony. They observed presence. This made judgment terrifyingly efficient. No one could lie. No one could hide behind explanation. Intent mattered less than impact. Excuses mattered not at all. The Greeks did not imagine a moral debate. They imagined sorting. This was why judgment felt inevitable rather than frightening. Fear requires uncertainty. Judgment removed it. The judges did not measure goodness in isolation. They measured disruption. A life that disturbed balance required correction. A life that passed quietly required no intervention. Most souls did not experience judgment as condemnation. They experienced it as routing, a brief redirection. This mattered. The Greeks did not believe most people deserved punishment. They believed most people deserved placement. And placement was not a reward. It was containment. The judges ensured that souls ended up where they would cause no further disturbance. This perspective is unsettling to modern thought. It suggests that morality was less important than stability. But to the Greeks, stability was the highest good. The judges did not operate hastily. Time did not pressure them. Eternity did not rush. Souls were processed steadily, without backlog, without urgency. This procedural calm frightened the Greeks. It meant that nothing about death was reactive. Grief did not slow judgment. Fame did not accelerate it. The judges did not respond to emotion. They responded to necessity. The Greeks believed that Minos, in particular, embodied this necessity. He was once a king in life, familiar with law and consequence. In death, he became law itself, not written, but enforced through placement. Minos did not weigh compassion against justice. He weighed outcome against order. This distinction mattered deeply. It meant that even sympathetic lives could be assigned to neutral regions if they did not warrant exception. Tragedy did not elevate. Suffering did not guarantee reward. The Greeks found this harsh, but honest. Rhadamanthus was associated with lies governed by restraint. Those who respected boundaries, upheld oaths, and lived within structure were recognized, but not celebrated. Recognition did not lead automatically to Elysium. It led to accuracy. Aeacus, guardian of thresholds, ensured access was controlled. Some souls were denied passage to certain regions, not as punishment, but as incompatibility. A soul unfit for stillness could not enter Elysium. A soul unfit for restraint could not remain uncontained. This logic frightened the Greeks because it suggested that character was permanent. You did not change in death, you settled. Judgment did not transform the soul, it revealed it. The Greeks believed that after judgment, the soul no longer questioned placement. Resistance had already dissolved. The clarity of decision brought a strange calm. This calm was not relief, it was resignation. Once placed, the soul adjusted quickly. Memory softened, desire faded, judgment ceased to matter because movement ceased. This was the final cruelty of the system. Judgment mattered intensely, briefly, then it stopped mattering at all. The Greeks feared this fleeting importance. It meant that the defining moment of your existence occurred when you no longer cared. Life was full of striving. Death resolved striving without consultation. The judges did not appear monstrous. They did not loom. They did not threaten. Their presence was understated. That understatement was the source of fear, because it suggested that the universe did not need to intimidate in order to enforce order. It simply proceeded. The Greeks told no stories of the judges being overruled, not by gods, not by fate. Their decisions stood because they were aligned with structure itself. This finality comforted and terrified. Comforted because chaos ended. Terrified because individuality ended with it. Judgment was not the climax of the afterlife. It was the last moment where life's meaning was acknowledged at all. Afterward, The soul belonged to geography, not narrative. To region, not story. The judges ensured this transition occurred smoothly, quietly, without appeal. Most souls did not fall into legend. Most souls did not defy gods, found cities, or reshape history. Most souls were ordinary, and the ancient Greeks believed that the underworld was built primarily for them. After judgment, after crossing, after gates and rivers, the vast majority of the dead did not descend into punishment or rise into reward. They moved gently into a state of quiet continuation, where nothing dramatic happened ever again. This place was not hidden, it was simply unremarkable. The Greeks believed that ordinary souls settled into the broad, pale expanses of the asphodel meadows, not as a sentence, but as a natural conclusion. This was where life went when it did not demand exception. There was no suffering here. There was also no joy. Souls in this region did not remember clearly who they had been. Names softened, faces blurred, memories lost their sharp edges. What remained was awareness without urgency. This absence of urgency mattered. In life, everything demanded response. Hunger demanded food. Fear demanded action. Love demanded attention. In death, these demands dissolved. The Greeks believed this dissolution was a kind of mercy. But mercy without warmth. Ordinary souls did not speak often. Conversation required desire, and desire had faded. They did not walk with purpose. They did not rest with intention. They existed in a steady state of being, neither rising nor falling. This existence was not emptiness. It was neutrality. The Greeks struggled with this idea. On one hand, it promised relief from pain. On the other, it erased significance. To live an entire life only to arrive at stillness felt unsettling. But the Greeks accepted it. Not everyone was meant to matter forever. This belief shaped how they lived. Glory mattered because it was rare. Virtue mattered because it might be noticed. Ordinary life mattered only while it lasted. Afterward, it became quiet. Souls in this region did not age. They did not grow wiser. They did not decay. Time passed without accumulation. Days did not stack into years. Moments did not build into stories. This endless present was the defining feature. The Greeks feared endless suffering, but they feared endless sameness almost as much. To exist without change meant no hope and no despair. No anticipation, no regret, just continuity. Ordinary souls did not feel punished for mediocrity. They simply experienced the outcome of balance. They had not disrupted order enough to require containment. They had not distinguished themselves enough to require exception. So they remained. The Greeks believed that most of humanity belonged here. This belief was humbling. Kings imagined themselves here. Farmers imagined themselves here. Children imagined themselves here. The afterlife did not inflate self-importance. It reduced it. In the asphodel meadows, there were no markers of status, no homes, no possessions, no achievements displayed. Everything that separated people in life had dissolved. The Greeks found this frightening because it suggested that difference was temporary. Only existence remained. Souls recognized one another vaguely, the way one recognizes a familiar shape without knowing its name. Relationships did not continue in the way the living hoped. Love did not reunite people dramatically. Grief did not heal through reunion. Attachment had already loosened too far. This was one of the most unsettling ideas in Greek belief, that love did not conquer death. It simply faded with it. The Greeks did not imagine souls longing intensely for the living. Longing required memory, and memory required sharpness. In the meadows, sharpness dulled quickly. This dulled state prevented torment, but also prevented fulfillment. It was neither cruel nor kind. It was final. The Greeks believed that if souls retained full memory, the underworld would become unbearable. Regret would loop endlessly. Loss would never soften. Lethe and time worked together to prevent this. For ordinary souls, forgetting was not a punishment, it was survival. The silence of this region was profound. Not empty silence, but consistent silence. No sudden noises, no surprises, nothing to break continuity. This consistency made the meadows stable, and stability was sacred. But Greeks feared chaos more than boredom. Chaos threatened order. Boredom did not. Ordinary souls became part of the landscape, not absorbed into it, but aligned with it. Their presence did not disturb the balance. They did not demand attention. They simply were. This belief made death feel smaller, but also more manageable. You did not need to fear eternal agony. You did not need to hope for eternal bliss. You could expect neutrality. This expectation shaped Greek attitudes toward death. They mourned loss, but they did not imagine endless suffering. They feared improper death, improper burial, improper crossing. But once properly placed, the soul would settle. Settle with the word. Not rewarded, not punished, settled. The Greeks believed that this settling was irreversible. Souls did not move upward or downward once placed. Change required desire, and desire no longer functioned. This permanence was frightening, but it was also reliable. Ordinary souls did not dream. They did not plan. They did not anticipate. They existed in a state where nothing was expected of them ever again. For a culture burdened by fate, labor, and uncertainty, this had a strange appeal. Endless neutrality meant endless rest. The Greeks did not celebrate this outcome. They accepted it. Acceptance was their form of peace. And so, most souls faded gently into the wide quiet of the underworld, not erased, not exalted, simply held. Held without urgency, held without end. The ancient Greeks did not imagine punishment as spectacle. There were no crowds, no flames meant to impress, no screams meant to echo. Punishment in the underworld was quiet, and because it was quiet, it was terrifying. The Greeks believed that the most severe punishments were not built on pain, but on repetition. Not on injury, but on futility. Not on agony, but on endurance without progress. This belief shaped the deepest regions of the underworld, especially the realm beneath all others, Tartarus, where punishment existed not to torture, but to contain. The figures punished here were not ordinary souls. They were exceptions. Individuals whose actions disrupted cosmic order so severely that neutrality was no longer sufficient. Their stories were preserved not because they were common, but because they illustrated a boundary. What happens when balance is broken? One of the most enduring figures of this punishment was Sisyphus. Sisyphus was not punished for violence alone. He was punished for cleverness used against order itself. He cheated death. He manipulated gods. he delayed inevitability. The Greeks did not admire this. They feared it. His punishment was simple: a stone, a hill, endless effort, no progress. Each time the stone reached the summit, it slipped away, not violently, quietly. The horror of Sisyphus was not the labor. It was the certainty that labor meant nothing. Effort did not accumulate. Hope was reset each time. This punishment mirrored the crime. Sisyphus tried to outlast inevitability. So inevitability outlasted him. Another figure condemned to this quiet futility was Tantalus. Tantalus was punished not with wounds, but with proximity. He stood in water he could not drink, beneath fruit he could not reach. Hunger and thirst were never resolved, only prolonged. The Greeks believed this punishment was precise. Tantalus abused intimacy with the gods. He violated trust. So his punishment denied fulfillment while preserving awareness of it. The cruelty was not deprivation alone. It was near fulfillment. Desire remained intact. Satisfaction was withheld forever. This was more frightening than pain. Pain could end. Desire without end could not. Then there was Ixion, bound to a spinning wheel that never stopped. His crime was betrayal at the highest level, violence against hospitality, the most sacred bond in Greek culture. Ixion's punishment was motion without direction. He moved constantly, but went nowhere. The Greeks saw this as a warning. Movement alone does not equal progress. Action without alignment becomes punishment. Ixion did not rest, but rest was not the goal. The goal was containment. These punishments were not designed to reform. There was no redemption arc, no lesson learned that led to release. The Greeks did not believe Tartarus existed to improve souls. It existed to isolate danger. This distinction mattered. Punishment was not moral theater. It was structural necessity. The Greeks feared these stories, not because they imagined themselves in Tartarus, but because they understood the logic behind it. Order could not tolerate certain disruptions. Those disruptions were not forgiven. They were neutralized. And neutralization was eternal. What made these punishments especially disturbing was their stillness. Even when motion occurred, nothing changed. The environment did not react. The underworld did not escalate. There was no climax. The punishment simply continued, endlessly. The Greeks believed this endlessness was the true terror. Humans endured pain because it ended. Endlessness removed endurance itself. It replaced hope with certainty, and certainty without relief is unbearable. There were no flames because flames flicker. There were no beasts because beasts tire. The Greeks understood that the most efficient punishment was one that required no maintenance, a stone that falls on its own, water that recedes naturally, a wheel that turns forever. These were not inventions of cruelty. They were properties of the world, repurposed. This naturalist made Tartarus frightening. It meant the universe itself enforced punishment without passion. No god needed to watch. No demon needed to act. The system sustained itself. The Greeks did not imagine most souls even seeing Tartarus. It was distant, sealed, separate, but its existence mattered because it defined limits. It said, some acts break the structure itself, and structure must survive. Punishment here was not about suffering. It was about prevention. preventing repetition, preventing influence, preventing return. Those in Tartarus could not disrupt the living or the dead. They were fixed in place, reduced to function, stripped of narrative. They did not grow wiser. They did not change. They did not end. This terrified the Greeks because it suggested that identity could be frozen forever at its worst moment. No forgetting, no softening, no lethe. Memory persisted here as part of the punishment. The Greeks did not glorify these stories. They repeated them quietly, as warnings, not entertainments. They did not linger on gore. They lingered on repetition. Repetition was the lesson. Do not believe cleverness can defeat order. Do not believe proximity to power grants immunity. Do not believe motion equals meaning. The underworld did not scream these warnings. It demonstrated them silently. This was why punishment without fire was more frightening than punishment with it. Fire suggested anger. Anger could cool, but structure did not cool. It endured. Tartarus was not hell. It was quarantine, and quarantine did not negotiate. The Greeks feared this because it meant the universe had limits that could not be crossed without permanent consequence. Most souls would never know this place, but knowing it existed was enough. It kept ambition measured, cleverness restrained, pride cautious. Punishment without fire did not burn the body. It exhausted meaning. And when meaning was gone, nothing remained but function. That was the final terror. Not every soul faded into neutrality. A small number did not settle into stillness. They were not absorbed. They were set apart. The ancient Greeks believed that some lives bent the structure of the underworld, just enough to be placed elsewhere, not because the system softened, but because it recognized exception. This place was not promised, it was granted. The Greeks called it the Elysian Fields, and sometimes in later tradition, the Isles of the Blessed. These names did not describe reward in the modern sense. They described distance, from suffering, from repetition, from erasure. Elysium was not loud. It was not triumphant. It was calm. The Greeks imagined Elysium as a region touched by light that did not glare, warmth that did not burn, and time that did not press. It was not perfection. Elysium was not a reward. Souls placed here were not perfect people. They were exceptional. This distinction mattered. The Greeks did not believe goodness alone earned Elysium. Many virtuous people lived quietly and faded into the meadows. Elysium was reserved for heroes, demigods, and those favored directly by the gods. Favor mattered more than fairness. This unsettled the Greeks, but they accepted it. Life itself was shaped by favor and fate. Death merely continued that pattern. Heroes like Achilles were sometimes imagined here, not because they were morally flawless, but because their lives burned brightly enough to leave residue. Their presence in Elysium did not celebrate violence. It neutralized it. In Elysium, the drive that once demanded action finally rested. The Greeks believed that heroes who reached this place were released from repetition. They did not relive battles. They did not train. They did not compete. They rested without boredom. This is what made Elysium distinct. In the meadows, neutrality dulled identity. In Tartarus, identity was frozen. In Elysium, identity softened without disappearing. Memory remained, that without pain. Fame remained, but without hunger. The Greeks imagined that music carried here, not as performance, but as presence. Conversation occurred, not to persuade, but to acknowledge. Movement happened, not to achieve, but to experience. Time did not accumulate into pressure. It flowed gently. Some myths suggested that only those who lived multiple virtuous lives could enter Elysium. Others claimed a single extraordinary life was enough. The Greeks did not resolve this inconsistency. They did not need to. Elysium was not a system to rely on. It was a possibility to respect. This uncertainty kept hope restrained. If Elysium had been guaranteed, it would have lost meaning. Its rarity was essential. Most souls would never arrive here, and knowing that made acceptance of neutrality easier. The Greeks feared entitlement more than denial. Elysium did not promise reunion with loved ones in the way modern heaven does. Souls did not search for family. Attachment had already loosened too far for longing to dominate. Relationships here were calm recognitions rather than reunions. This was not tragic. It was peaceful. The Greeks believed that those in Elysium did not envy the living. Desire for life required urgency, and urgency no longer existed. The living world felt distant, like a story already finished. This absence of envy was important. It meant Elysium did not pull attention away from the living world. The dead remained separate. Even the blessed did not interfere. The Greeks feared interference more than abandonment. Elysium preserved boundaries. Some traditions spoke of reincarnation from Elysium, souls choosing to return to life after drinking from Lethe and preparing again. This idea appeared later and was never universal. Its presence, however, reveals something important. Even bliss was not imagined as eternal necessity. Choice returned briefly, but only to the exceptional. For most souls, even the blessed, Elysium was enough. The Greeks did not imagine endless celebration. Endless celebration would become burden. Instead, they imagined endless sufficiency. Nothing was missing, nothing demanded, nothing needed improvement. This sufficiency was the greatest luxury imaginable. The Greeks feared abundance more than lack. Too much passion caused chaos. Too much desire caused suffering. The Elysium removed excess without removing awareness. It was balance perfected. This is why the Greeks did not envy the blessed intensely. They respected them, but did not expect to join them. Acceptance of rarity kept the system stable. If everyone deserved Elysium, the underworld would collapse under expectation. The Greeks preferred order to hope. Elysium also reinforced a sobering truth. Even heroes ended. They did not ascend forever. They did not rule. They did not escape death. They were contained gently, like everyone else. This containment reassured the living. It meant no one escaped the system entirely. Exception did not threaten structure. Even the most celebrated lives concluded quietly. The Greeks told stories of heroes longing for life from within the underworld, but these stories were warnings, not promises. Glory did not erase loss. Fame did not prevent longing. Elysium softened longing. It did not restore life. This finality mattered. The Greeks did not believe immortality was desirable. They believed continuity without urgency was enough. Elysium was not heaven. It was rest for those who had burned too brightly. And because it was rare, it remained believable. Because it was quiet, it remained stable. Because it did not promise more, it remained peaceful. In the end, Elysium did not undermine the underworld. It completed it. The underworld was not ruled by chaos. It was ruled by presence. At the center of the Greek vision of death stood two figures who did not shout, did not threaten, and did not explain themselves. They did not chase souls. They did not torment them. They simply remained. Their stillness was authority. The Greeks called the ruler of the underworld Hades, not a demon, not an enemy of life, a god of placement, wealth, and permanence. His realm was not fire or punishment, but containment. Hades did not steal souls. Souls arrived because they had to. This distinction mattered deeply to the Greeks. Hades was not responsible for death. Death happened on its own. Hades received what followed. He governed what could not return. This made him feared, but not hated. The Greeks did not imagine Hades as cruel. They imagined him as unmoved. He did not interfere with human affairs, because interference required interest. The underworld did not care enough to intervene. Indifference was more frightening than anger. Hades did not rule through commands. He ruled through inevitability. Everything that entered his domain stayed, because nothing compelled it to leave. The system enforced itself. This was why Hades rarely appeared in myth. Presence did not require visibility. His palace was imagined as quiet, distant, and immense, not built to impress, built to endure. It did not glitter, it did not decay, it simply existed, as the underworld itself did. The Greeks believed Hades valued order above all else. Not justice, not mercy, order. Souls were not punished or rewarded because of him. They were placed because the system demanded placement. Hades ensured the system remained sealed. Beside him ruled another presence, one more unsettling because she bridged worlds. Persephone. Persephone was not merely Hades' consort. She was the reminder that the underworld was connected to life, not separate from it. Her existence explained seasons, cycles, and return, without undoing finality. The Greeks believed Persephone understood both urgency and stillness. She had lived above. She now ruled below. This duality made her powerful in a way Hades was not. She did not soften the underworld. She explained it. Persephone's presence meant that the realm of the dead was not alien. It was the other half of existence. Growth required decay. Life required return. Stillness followed movement. The Greeks did not see her as a captive. They saw her as a balance. Her cycles above and below mirrored the agricultural rhythms the Greeks depended on. But in the underworld, Persephone did not bring spring. She brought recognition. Souls placed before her were not judged emotionally, but they were seen. Persephone represented the last trace of empathy in a system that did not rely on it. This did not make the underworld kinder. It made it complete. The Greeks believed that Hades and Persephone did not argue. There was no conflict between them. Conflict implied instability. Their rule was stable precisely because it was quiet. They did not punish offenders personally. They did not reward favorites impulsively. They presided. This calm rule was terrifying because it suggested that suffering was not personal. It was procedural. That comfort was not denied out of malice. It was absent because the system did not require it. The Greeks feared gods who cared too much. Hades cared just enough. His realm also governed wealth, hidden wealth, minerals, seeds, roots, everything valuable that existed underground fell under his authority. This association reinforced the idea that value was not always visible and that stillness could contain abundance. Death did not erase worth, it concealed it. Persephone reinforced this symbolism. Seeds buried in darkness returned transformed. Souls buried in the underworld did not return, but the world above depended on their absence. This interdependence mattered. The Greeks believed that if the underworld failed, life would fail with it. Crops would not grow, order would collapse, boundaries would dissolve. Hades and Persephone maintained those boundaries quietly. They did not seek worship in the way other gods did. Shrines to Hades were rare. His name was spoken carefully, often avoided, not out of hatred, but out of respect. To speak his name too freely invited attention. Attention was dangerous. The Greeks did not pray to Hades for favor. They prayed to avoid notice. This fear reveals something essential. The underworld was not evil. It was final, and finality frightened the living more than cruelty. Persephone softened that fear just enough to make it bearable. Her presence reminded the Greeks that descent was part of a larger cycle, even if return was not personal. She did not promise reunion. She promised continuity. Together, Hades and Persephone embodied the ultimate Greek truth that order persists without emotion, that existence continues without commentary, that endings are not dramatic. They are administered. Souls did not kneel before them. They passed through their domain. The gods below did not rule by command. They ruled by remaining. Remaining when all motion ceased. Remaining when all urgency dissolved. The Greeks did not imagine rebellion in the underworld. There were no uprisings, no challenges. Power here was too stable to contest. That stability was terrifying, because it meant death could not be negotiated with, only accepted. Hades did not hate the living. Persephone did not long for them endlessly. Both had roles that transcended preference. They were not villains, they were constants. This understanding allowed the Greeks to live without constant panic. Death was not waiting to attack. It was waiting to receive. And the gods below would be there, unchanged, unmoved when it happened. Very few crossed the threshold alive. The ancient Greeks believed this rarity was not accidental. The underworld was not hidden because it was secret. It was inaccessible because life did not belong there. Breath, warmth, and urgency disrupted the balance below. And yet, a handful descended, not as tourists, not as conquerors, as exceptions that proved the rule. To enter the underworld while alive required permission, compulsion, or sacrifice so great that return would never be free. The Greeks told these stories carefully because each one carried the same warning. The underworld allows entry, but it always collects a price. The most fragile descent belonged to Orpheus. Orpheus did not descend with weapons or commands. He descended with music. His purpose was not curiosity, it was grief. He sought to retrieve Eurydice, not to defy death, but to undo a single loss. This distinction mattered. The Greeks believed the underworld responded to purpose more than force. Orpheus's music did not overpower the realm. It aligned with it. Sound softened boundaries without breaking them. Cerberus stilled. Rivers slowed. Even the quiet of the dead seemed to listen. This listening terrified the Greeks. It suggested that the underworld could be moved, not by strength, but by harmony. That order could be paused without being violated. Hades and Persephone allowed Orpheus to attempt return, not because they were persuaded emotionally, but because the request fit the system's logic. A single exception would not unravel eternity. But the condition mattered. Orpheus was told not to look back until both had fully crossed into the living world. The rule was simple, clear, and impossible. The Greeks did not interpret Orpheus's failure as impatience. They interpreted it as inevitability. To look back was human. To doubt was human. The underworld did not punish him for doubt. It allowed the consequence. This is the quiet cruelty of the myth. Orpheus was not attacked. He was not condemned. He was permitted to fail. And permission was enough. Eurydice faded, not because the gods were angry, but because the condition was structural. Return could not tolerate uncertainty. Orpheus's glance reintroduced it. The Greeks feared this myth because it revealed a truth they already suspected. Love does not override structure. Emotion cannot renegotiate order. Even the most beautiful plea could only pause finality, not erase it. Another dissent was far less delicate. Heracles entered the underworld under command, not desire. His task was to retrieve Cerberus and bring him to the living world. This was not grief-driven. It was labor. Heracles did not soften the underworld. He strained against it. The Greeks believed this distinction was crucial. Heracles required divine permission and overwhelming strength. Even then, he did not bypass the system. He confronted it directly and survived only because the system allowed temporary disruption. Cerberus was taken, not stolen. He was returned. The boundary reasserted itself immediately. Heracles' descent demonstrated that even strength could not permanently alter death's order. Power could endure the underworld briefly, but not claim it. Then there was Odysseus, whose descent, often called the Nekia, was neither rescue nor labor. It was consultation. Odysseus did not enter to retrieve. He entered to listen. The Greeks believed this was the most dangerous reason of all. Seeking knowledge from the dead risked contamination. The dead knew things the living could not use safely. Prophecy extracted from the underworld carried weight that could crush a life. Odysseus did not descend fully. He stood at the edge. He performed rites. He allowed the dead to approach. Even this partial crossing was perilous. The Greeks feared this myth because it showed how thin the boundary could become. A ritual, a night, a question. That was all it took to invite voices that should not speak. In every case, the living returned altered, not empowered, diminished. Orpheus returned without Eurydice and without the music that once connected him to life. Heracles returned exhausted, marked by proximity to finality. Odysseus returned burdened with knowledge he could not avoid. No one returned unchanged. This was the lesson. The Greeks believed the underworld tolerated visitors only because their visits reinforced its authority. Every return demonstrated loss. Every survival proved limitation. No one brought something back without leaving something behind. Even when gods permitted descent, the price was permanent. Memory, joy, certainty, something always eroded. This belief discouraged curiosity. The Greeks did not romanticize exploration of death. They treated it as contamination risk. The underworld was not forbidden because it was evil. It was avoided because it was final. Finality did not mix with life. The stories of descent also emphasized that return depended on obedience. Rules were few, but absolute. Look forward, complete the task, do not linger, do not listen too long. The Greeks feared rules more than threats. Rules did not argue. Breaking them did not provoke anger, it produced consequence. This made the underworld more frightening than tyrants or monsters. Tyrants could be reasoned with. Monsters could be fought. Structure could not. The living who descended did not conquer fear. They confirmed it. They proved that death was accessible, but not negotiable. That boundaries could be crossed, but not weakened. That exceptions existed, but always in service of order. The Greeks told these stories not to inspire bravery, but restraint. Do not follow the dead. Do not linger at thresholds. Do not believe love, strength, or cleverness will save you. The underworld allows entry. It does not allow escape. Those who returned did so only because the system was confident they posed no threat. Their suffering was the evidence, and that suffering lingered longer than the journey itself. The ancient Greeks did not fear hell. They feared disorder. This distinction is easy to miss if you look for flames, demons, or eternal screaming. The Greek underworld did not threaten souls with endless agony by default. It offered something far more unsettling and far more believable. It offered structure. The Greeks lived in a world where life itself was unpredictable. Storms destroyed crops. Illness arrived without warning. War reshaped cities overnight. Fate moved without explanation. Against this instability, the underworld appeared strangely reliable. Death did not introduce chaos. It ended it. This is why the Greeks did not imagine the afterlife as a place to dread endlessly. They imagined it as a place where uncertainty stopped, where urgency dissolved, where struggle finally lost its grip. Hell, as later traditions imagined it, was loud and emotional. It punished with spectacle. It relied on fear to enforce morality. The Greek underworld did not need fear to function. It relied on inevitability. Most souls were not threatened with torment. They were absorbed into neutrality. This was not comforting in a joyful sense, but it was calming. There would be no surprises, no sudden reversals, no endless striving. For people exhausted by life, this mattered. The Greeks feared being trapped in chaos far more than being trapped in stillness. Stillness meant rest from decision, rest from expectation, rest from consequence. This is why Tartarus existed only for exceptions. Punishment was not the default. Containment was. The Greeks believed that most human lives did not disrupt cosmic order enough to require suffering after death. Most people were neither heroes nor monsters. They were ordinary. Ordinary souls did not deserve cruelty. They deserved quiet. This perspective reshaped how the Greeks understood morality. Goodness was not rewarded with paradise. Evil was not always punished with pain. What mattered was balance. Life out of balance required correction. Life within balance required no response. The underworld enforced balance impersonally. That impersonality was its strength. The Greeks also did not imagine the gods as obsessed with moral policing. The gods were powerful, emotional, and sometimes cruel. But they were not accountants of virtue. They cared about honor, boundaries, and respect more than abstract goodness. This meant that fear of hell was not an effective motivator. Acceptance of fate was. The Greeks lived knowing that death would come regardless of behavior. This did not make them reckless. It made them realistic. You did not behave well to escape death. You behaved well to live with dignity. Death did not erase that dignity, but it did not amplify it either. This balance removed obsession. The Greeks feared improper death far more than bad afterlife. To die unburied, to die unnamed, to die without ritual. These were true horrors because they disrupted the system. Once properly placed, the soul would not suffer endlessly. It would settle. Settling was not joy, it was resolution. The Greeks also understood that endless reward would create endless desire. Endless desire would become torment of a different kind. Elysium was rare, precisely because eternity could not sustain intensity. Intensity burned out, stillness endured. This is why the Greeks did not promise heaven to everyone. Heaven for all would lose meaning. It would destabilize expectation. It would encourage excess. The underworld discouraged excess. It was modest, quiet, predictable. The Greeks found comfort in predictability. Knowing that death followed rules made life feel less arbitrary. Fate might strike without warning, but death would receive everyone the same way. That equality mattered. Kings and beggars arrived alike. Fame did not grant exemption. Poverty did not increase suffering. The underworld neutralized social imbalance. This neutrality softened resentment. It also softened hope. The Greeks did not fear hell because hell implied moral drama. Drama belonged to life. Death ended drama. This is why their myths of the underworld are restrained. They do not linger on horror. They linger on process. Rivers, gates, judges, regions. Procedure replaced terror. Procedure is calming. Even Tartarus, with all its punishments, was not imagined as chaotic cruelty. It was precise, purposeful, limited in scope. Not everyone went there, only those who threatened order itself. This made punishment understandable, and what is understandable is less frightening. The Greeks viewed gods who acted unpredictably. They did not fear systems that remained consistent. The underworld was the most consistent system they imagined. It did not change. It did not react emotionally. It did not escalate. It simply continued. This continuity allowed the Greeks to face death without hysteria, not without sadness, but without panic. Grief existed, but terror did not dominate. Death was not a trap. It was a conclusion. The Greeks did not seek death. They valued life deeply, but they did not imagine death as annihilation or torture. They imagined it as a transition into a quieter state of being. Less demanding, less volatile. This belief made endurance possible. When life became unbearable, death remained comprehensible. That comprehension mattered. The Greeks did not fear hell because hell promised endless suffering. They feared life more than death because life demanded constant response. Death demanded nothing. And for a people burdened by fate, obligation, and uncertainty, that absence of demand felt almost merciful. The underworld did not offer hope. It offered certainty, and certainty was enough. In the end, the ancient Greeks did not imagine darkness rushing toward them. They imagined quiet waiting. After all the movement, after breath stopped, after the soul loosened, after the road, the rivers, the ferrymen, the gates, the judges, there was no final shock. There was stillness. The underworld did not close in. It opened out. Eternity for the Greeks was not an explosion of meaning. It was the gradual disappearance of urgency, the fading of demand, the soft removal of pressure that life never stopped applying. Nothing chased the soul here. Nothing called for it. Nothing expected anything from it ever again. This was the final truth the Greeks accepted, that existence did not need to be dramatic to be complete, that meaning did not need to stretch forever to matter, that endings could be quiet without being cruel. The Greeks feared disorder more than death, and the underworld promised order without effort. Once placed, the soul did not struggle to remain. It did not need to perform identity. It did not need to remember who it had been with precision. Memory softened, time flattened. The future stopped asking questions. This was the eternal quiet, not silence as absence, but silence as stability. But Greeks believed that even fear eventually dissolved here. Fear required anticipation. Anticipation required future. In the underworld, future lost its sharpness. Everything existed in an extended present that did not move toward anything. Souls did not wait for change. They rested within sameness. This sameness was not punishment. It was resolution. The Greeks lived surrounded by noise, markets, arguments, storms, war, labor, hunger. Their myths reflect exhaustion as much as imagination. The underworld answered that exhaustion not with reward, but with removal. No more striving, no more proving, no more becoming, just being. This is why the underworld frightened and comforted them at the same time. It promised an end to suffering, but also an end to distinction. You would not hurt forever, but you would not shine forever either. And the Greeks accepted that trade. They did not seek immortality. Immortality belonged to gods, and gods were not happy. They were powerful, volatile, and endlessly entangled in consequence. Mortality was relief, because mortality ended. The eternal quiet did not erase life's importance. It framed it. Knowing that nothing lasted made everything temporary and therefore precious. The Greeks valued moments precisely because moments ended. Death did not cheapen life. It completed it. This is why their stories do not rage against the underworld. They approach it slowly, thoughtfully, almost respectfully. The realm of the dead was not an enemy. It was the final structure that held what life released. When night came, the Greeks did not imagine sleep as a rehearsal for terror. They imagined it as practice for letting go. Every night, consciousness faded, control softened, morning returned, until one day it did not. And that was acceptable, because the system would receive them, because nothing chaotic waited, because the noise would finally stop. The eternal quiet was not a promise of happiness. It was a promise of no more demand. No one would call your name. No one would ask for your strength. No one would require your fear. For a culture shaped by fate, this absence felt like mercy. And perhaps that is why these stories still work. Why Even now, listening in the dark, something in the mind slows when the underworld is described this way. Not as horror, not as punishment, but as quiet. If you've stayed with this journey, from the first breath leaving the body to the final settling into stillness, then let your thoughts slow now too. Nothing more is required. If you want more long, calm journeys through ancient myths, dark history, and quiet ideas designed for sleep, subscribe to the channel and like the video so these stories can keep finding you, night after night. Now, rest.